Now, about this time last week, what everybody but American President Joe Biden saw as inevitable happened. The Taliban took control of Kabul. After 20 years, Afghanistan is back under barbaric rule and the killing, from all reports, has begun. Now, Prime Minister Scott Morrison, when pressed this morning, wouldn't say how many Australians are trapped behind what are effectively enemy lines, nor would he tell us how many Afghan nationals are pretty much dead men walking. These are the scenes in Kabul. You are delusional as Biden. You are as delusional as Biden is mentally unfit to be president if you believe for a second the PR spin that the Taliban has matured into some new moderate Taliban 0.20. It's the same Taliban that detonated IEDs that killed Australian troops. The same Taliban that carried out public executions and stoned people to death. But hey, suddenly they're serving as ushers at the airport and we can trust them. Just ask Biden.
We've made an agreement with the Taliban thus far. They've allowed them to go through. It's in their interest for them to go through.
Biden has created what has become a humanitarian crisis. It has humiliated America and its allies and must have jihadists around the globe cheering. Now, let's be clear. This is the new look Taliban. American uniforms, American weapons, even Black Hawk helicopters. The jails have been emptied and the Pentagon admits al-Qaeda remains in Afghanistan. In 2001, we saw that desperation scene of people leaping from the Twin Towers. We saw it again as people fell from planes trying to escape Kabul. But it's this, an infant hoisted over a wall at the airport to US Marines. Children were put on trains to escape the Nazis. You can't tell me the Afghan people don't know what it means to live under Taliban rule, and that's why they're doing this. One man who helped the Allies has been hung, his body dismembered. All of his family has been killed, except for his 10-year-old daughter, who the Taliban took away. Now, it's no surprise that our veterans are left asking why. Was it worth it? And they're hurting. 11 years ago, while embedded with our troops in Afghanistan, they saved my life and the lives of our crew.
An hour later, we were under attack.
To feel a lot more, especially from...
Oh, guys.
Come down. Go.
OK, so we were in the middle of an interview when the remote patrol base we were on suddenly started taking fire. We heard a rocket come in. We have no idea how close it was. We were inside a tent at the time. We were told to hit the ground, throw in our armoured McBass and get down here to the nearest shelter. Now we just have to wait while these guys go out and see just what's going on. At this point, Taliban insurgents were just 300 metres from the base firing on us.
Oh, if you hear another RPG, hit the ground, all right?
So the gunfire has stopped for now. It seems to have been quiet now for about 30 seconds or so. It's just happened again. Now you can smell outside the distinct smell of gunfire.
Now, our troops have seen their mates die. They answered the call to serve. They saw they were making a difference, all until now. This is a crisis of Biden's making, and the US has its allies absolutely scrambling. The British and French have special forces on the ground, finding their people. My question is, what confidence can we have in America? We need, one, to get our Australians out, get Afghans who helped us and their families out, and help those wanting to flee. And we need to do it fast. A humiliated America and an empowered Taliban puts all of us at risk. Let's never forget the Taliban harboured al-Qaeda, and we had 9/11. It's time we reassess our military capabilities. And thirdly, we must support our troops and veterans. We lost 41 Australians, and so many more since to veteran suicide. Others I know are living, or at least trying to live with, the physical and psychological trauma. If we've found these images and stories coming out of Afghanistan disturbing, just think for a second the impact it's having on our defence community. Catherine, I watched former elite commando Heston Russell on your show, The McGregor Angle, on Friday night. This isn't just a catastrophic failing by the US, it is re-traumatising the men and women who proudly served our country. That Royal Commission into veteran suicide, sure, we have the terms of reference, but it's time for action before we see even more deaths that need investigating.
Yeah, absolutely, and I know Heston's a friend of yours, Leisa, and I count him as a friend as well, and we've spoken a couple of times and exchanged a number of messages over recent days. Yeah. And you're quite right, it's opened wounds not only amongst the present cohort of younger veterans, but the images of the helicopters leaving those roofs even had some of the old Vietnam guys remembering the end of the Vietnam War. And Wednesday was the anniversary of the Battle of Long Tan, which is Vietnam Veterans Day. And a lot of those people were also reaching out, feeling quite empty, and their wounds are reopened. I'm in violent agreement with you about everything, except I don't believe it is purely Biden's fault. I think naming that date was catastrophic and stupid on his part. Yeah. But I think this has been a slow-moving train wreck, and I think the mission creep after the initial destruction of the AQ infrastructure in 2001 and early 2002, we didn't need to embark on a nation-building mission there. I think that was a terrible mistake. I agree that the loss of American will is a risk to us, but more so in terms of China's ambitions across the Indo-Pacific. I'm not as concerned about jihadist terrorism now. I think our internal systems are better than they were pre-9/11. If you look back to 9/11, every one of those guys was on a no-fly list. They shouldn't have gone through Logan Airport, much less board an aircraft and take it over. So I think we're in better shape as a consequence of this commitment. And I'd say to all our veteran community, they served with great distinction. They can be proud of what they did. And their feeling of emptiness and abandonment is totally understandable. And now's the time when we all need one another and reach out to your mates.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Ollie, in WA, clearly that's a huge base for the SAS, and you have an enormous defence community in WA. So this would have hit very hard there. And then we've seen Trump today come out and say, look, put simply, the enemies are no longer frightened of America, and that's chilling.
Yeah, and we saw it play out like everybody else throughout the week. I actually spoke to the former Veterans Affairs Minister, Darren Chester, on my program earlier in the week, and it just sort of created an opportunity for lots of our listeners here in Western Australia as well to reflect on exactly what you have both just touched on there, Catherine and Leisa, in regards to even going back to their memories of Vietnam War. We have the SAS Campbell Barracks here in Western Australia. Very, very strong ties, obviously, to the Defence Forces in this part of the country. But I also think, as a younger Australian, which I am, this is the first conflict that has really been in forefront of my world. I remember my father coming into my bedroom to wake me up to say that the aeroplanes had just hit the Twin Towers. And then this has all played out, of course, live here on television over the last 20 years. So I think the enormity of what has just happened for people like me as well, who are 30-something, I've never had the courage to go and serve on behalf of my nation, but you do sit back and reflect and go, why? What's this about? And I think there's a lot of interest in a lot of our history when it comes to the conflicts that Australians have served in. And I agree with what Catherine had to say there. It's not as simple as now walking away from what's happened in Afghanistan, bury our heads here, say, was it worth it or whatnot? We had an original mission, which was to go after bin Laden. It was to destroy those al-Qaeda strongholds in Afghanistan and into Iraq. We went back in for a nation-building exercise. Maybe we think twice again, but we certainly don't walk away or deteriorate that tie that we have with the United States in whatever our future looks like and whatever conflicts we might have to enter into, or whatever national security issues that are going to be facing our nation over the next decade.
Well, it's interesting that you say that for you and for your generation, this was the first sort of exposure to war. And if you think about in Afghanistan, you've got a new generation, young girls who have grown up over the past 20 years, being able to be educated, being able to leave the house, to live a life like they should be allowed to live. Now, I've watched this and thought, where are all of the lefty women who are out there saying, what about women's rights? Justin, it just seems to be silent. If this had happened under Trump, there would be a huge outcry. But the left media in America aren't covering it anywhere like they would if it was under Trump. And certainly the hashtag Me Too and the women of the world who are out there fighting for women's rights and equity and fair treatment and basic human rights, they're silent.
Look, I agree with you on the Trump thing because I think in a lot of ways, because Trump was the sort of person he was, and Biden's getting off a little bit lightly on this one, and it's not necessarily the actions that he's done, but some of the words that he's used and some of the ways he's talked is ridiculous. I mentioned this during the week, but Biden has started referring to it as the Afghanistan civil war. What? Hang on a second. I mean, I was there in 2013. I didn't see as much as you did, Leisa, but I was there in 2013. I've never heard anyone call it the Afghanistan civil war in my life. All of a sudden, now that we've gone out of there and it's a disaster, he starts throwing the word civil in there. And I just think that language is ridiculous. But the Taliban, I mean, you've pegged them just right. They are awful, despicable people. The chances of them going back in there and saying, hey, listen, we went to night school and we learned all about democracy and, we're going to hold some free elections and we're going to look after people. That's the biggest load of crap in that sham of a press conference that they had where they said, oh, look, women will be able to be educated and they'll be able to go to work, provided it's within Sharia law, they said, with their head pointed down. It's awful. I really feel for these people. And I'm with you on the veterans too. Our veterans need all our love and care at the moment because the time that they'll be going through at the moment is just unthinkable. They've lost friends over there. They've lost people to suicide because of Afghanistan. And now we just walk away like it was a bad job. It's just heartbreaking. It really is.